Hello and welcome to, well, not quite a review of Her Story for PC, Mac, iOS, and Android. What you're seeing here is the PC version. This is an interactive movie by Sam Barlow that was released in June of last year, and it went on to receive a huge amount of acclaim. People seemed to love it, and it received a very, very large amount of awards, with most of the praise coming from the fact that this is different from pretty much any other game on the market right now. So that of course begs the question, does it deserve all that hype? Let's go ahead and delve into this thing and find out. Well, as far as presentation goes, there's really not much to talk about here. This is an interactive movie. There is almost nothing to the visuals. You have the interface that you interact with to watch the clips, and then you have the video clips themselves, which are extremely grainy FMV made to look like a VHS recording, which I can kind of get behind. In fact, the whole thing has a suitably retro vibe to it, like you're delving into an old Windows 3.1 system, for example. Now, by default, it runs with a setting that makes it look like you're on an old CRT monitor and everything, complete with scan lines, but you can turn that off if you want, if it's getting in the way of actually watching the clips. But if you do keep that setting on, then you'll occasionally see glimpses of your character's face, and you'll see some things in the background that denote where exactly you are, which is at a police station, which of course makes sense given the game's subject matter, although I keep saying game. I mean that very, very loosely, in the sense of you can interact with it, because other than the FMV clips and the interface, there's really nothing to it. You get the sound effects that feel right at home with an old desktop machine, and you have the ambient sounds that denote your character is in a police station, but other than that, you really don't have all that much. There is a bit of music, and it's some pretty decent music, but it really doesn't do much to enhance the experience. And that's a very significant problem, because unlike actual video games, which have gameplay mechanics to fall back on, this doesn't. All it has is its presentation in the form of the FMV clips, all of which feature Viva Seifert doing interviews for the case at hand. And the quality of her acting ranges from actually fairly good all the way to, wow, this is extremely amateurish. And once you get past that, you find that the entire game, I put that in extremely loose quotes, is doing one of three things. 1, you're watching a video clip. 2, you're playing the minigame, which is just a copy of Reversi. Or 3, you're entering in keywords into the search function to pull up more video clips. So obviously the vast majority of the game is spent entering in the keywords and watching the video clips, and that will take you roughly 2 to 3 hours to complete, although your mileage may vary if you don't use the right keywords. Now, I actually got through the entirety of the video clips, all 271 of them. Yes, 271 video clips that are telling a story in basically whatever order you come across the clips in. This means that you could enter the right search term extremely early and have the entire plot spoiled for you before you've managed to sift through and actually get some of the supporting information. This is a particularly nasty problem because it means that the story is told in such a disjointed manner that it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense until you've watched all 271 clips. Here's the thing. If you know the order for the clips, you can literally just string the clips together and watch the clips in movie form, and thus you have completely defeated the point of the so-called gameplay in this. And that's probably a good thing because you can get stuck for a while entering search terms that you didn't realize you'd gone through before already, and thus you're pulling up a bunch of the same clips you've already seen, until finally you manage to get that one you missed way back when. Which of course means that that so-called gameplay that this thing has is really just annoying and extremely tedious. In fact, this thing gave Diablo a run for its money on the boredom factor. Thing is, I can't even call this a game, so it really isn't on the same footing, but this thing is just ungodly boring in the mechanics department. So it really does fall to the actual story to bring things up. What's the story? It's a fairly basic whodunit where you go through the various clips and you gradually piece together what actually happened in the case of this missing guy, Simon. Although the game doesn't have anything to keep track of that for you, so you're having to do that all on your own notes or in your head, which really isn't that hard because most of the clips in this thing are kind of worthless regarding the storyline. Now, I'm not going to spoil the storyline, but like I said before, it is extremely easy to hit the spoilers for it extremely early early before you actually have the supporting information, meaning that you can get to the twist that is supposed to be revealed later on right off the bat, and suddenly the impact of the narrative is completely gone. And that's precisely what happened to me, actually. I found out what the actual twist is extremely early on. I'm like, oh, that's it? And then when you get to the actual end of the game, in air quotes, then it asks you if you're done. You hit yes, and then it's like, okay, do you understand this? Yes. And then it just ends. Roll credits. Absolutely no replay value whatsoever, because it is just literally an interactive movie. And the movie itself, frankly, is not very good. It may not be the worst I've ever seen, but let's face it, I've seen a lot of mysteries, I've seen a lot of whodunit stories, and this is one of the weaker ones. And quite frankly, I am utterly baffled at the ridiculous amount of hype that has been generated around it. I mean, this thing has won numerous awards. In fact, it won 2 awards at the Game Awards for last year, namely Best Performance and Best Narrative. I mean, I have to ask, if you're one of the people who seem to think that this is some masterpiece of the art form, I have to ask what you're smoking, because it must be some really good shit. At best, this is an interactive movie, not a video game, an interactive movie that is a decent bit of experimentation with completely non-linear storytelling. And as an interactive movie, it's going to mean that you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it. Interactive movies are basically always going to be that way. You're either going to like them or you're not going to like them. There is no in-between. There is barely anything you can actually objectively assess other than, how good's the movie? And in Her Story's case, well, I guess it just depends on how few books you've read, how few movies you've seen, and how few video games you've played. Because the chance is that the more of all 3 of those you've experienced, the less this is going to have an impact on you. And quite frankly, I look at the vast majority of the hype it got and see it's different, therefore it's amazing, and that's really not the case. It's really better to look at this thing more from an experimental standpoint than anything else. They tried something different, it doesn't really work, but at least it's different, therefore it sets itself apart from pretty much everything else on the market. Now these days, in a market completely saturated with samey nonsense, that's certainly appreciated, but you gotta make it good, people. And Her Story really isn't good. If you like it, that's up to you, but I really cannot remotely recommend this thing to anyone. Unless you're one of those artsy-fartsy types who seems to think that something like Dear Esther is amazing. In which case, you completely and utterly baffle me. If for some reason you still want to try this thing out, despite what I've said about it, then I will still have a link in the video description box where you can take a look at it, but I can't remotely recommend it. Thanks for watching.